Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Top Talk guest webinar. Hi, Robert. I know I have you in the wings because we've been chatting previously. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. Yourself?
I'm very good, mate. I know you've had a busy day because you've been out teaching all day, so thank you for agreeing to do this hour for us. Rob, before we get started and before I hand you over the screen and we look at your work, just tell us a little bit about you as a photographer, how you got into it, and sort of what you do today.
Oh wow. Okay. So yeah, how I got into it? Well, I was basically brought up in a dark room, and it was literally that. So my bedroom was the loft converted into a bedroom, and my dad decided that it made the perfect dark room. So I was brought up with my dad developing in my bedroom all the photos he was taking, and that sort of gave me a love of photography. So I studied arts at school. But then when I left school, I went into the army. I was a sniper in the army. Did 8 years then. I decided I wanted to come out, and I didn't really want to work for anyone. So I decided to go back in photography. And because of my relationship in the army and outside, I already knew quite a lot of contacts, and I became sort of a profile photographer for celebs. So I was covering things like the X Factor. I was doing their photos, the Nobel Gala Awards, Mariah Carey, and a lot of the big stuff for the press as well. And off the back of that, I started up my RP Photography by Design business, and the weddings started flowing in, and I got to a point where I was covering 38 weddings a year, and I had to make a decision whether I stick with the press side or I take my divert over to the wedding side. And I love doing the wedding photography. Everyone's so happy when you're doing it, and it sort of kind of relaxes me as well. So I headed over to just solely doing wedding and portraits. Never looked back, and I cover all over the world now for wedding photography. So yeah, that sort of really brings me up to date. And as you know as well, I obviously do a lot with Olympus. I'm one of their ambassadors, and that sort of brought me on to using their equipment. And I don't own a DSLR anymore. All my work is done with an Olympus OMD EM1 or an EM5.
Brilliant, Rob. So I was going to lead me on and ask you about your transition to Olympus, but obviously I knew that was part of tonight's proceedings anyway. So Rob, I'll hand you the screen because I know we've got a lot to cover.
I thought we'll have a talk about some wedding images first. I've got a couple of folders set up with weddings, portraits and street photography, because I do a lot of street photography. So I class wedding and portraits as my business, and my street photography I class as my hobby, because I always think you need a balance, because if you did everything as work, you won't be able to get away from it and sort of de-stress away from your working career. So street photography is very much my hobby, so-called. Okay, so what I will do is I'm going to talk about some of the images as I go along. Please, if you've got any questions, then fire them over to Jay, and I'd love to answer them. So, wedding photography. I'm quite strict on really what I take, and a lot of people are very shocked by this because I only take 350 shots, and that is literally leaving the wedding with 350 shots, because my time is money, and if I take 1,000 shots, then I'm going to sit in front of my screen and I'm going to be there for quite a few hours sieving through them all. And I love all my images, so I'm not really going to delete any. So that's why I'm really sort of strict on what I take and how I take it, and my customers know that they're only going to get 350 shots from me. So this is a recent wedding. This is actually the Voigtländer lens. It's the 35mm Voigtländer. So in micro four thirds terms, it's the 17.5, and it's a 0.95 aperture. So when I talk, I'll put it all through as a 35mm format, but to get to the micro four thirds, just halve it back, and then it'll be back at the micro four thirds focal length. So this was shot at f2, and I've got a flash on top of my camera, and it's pointing back at a very dark wall. I shoot all my black and whites are all shot in camera, and this would have been a JPEG because it's an in-camera shot. And this is why this is just lit up just around the back where you see the chairs. You can see this because the flash has bounced off the wall as well. But my exposure was for through the glass in the front of you, looking out. That's where my exposure's done. So all my shots are in manual. I work in fully manual, and that's one reason why I like the Voigtländer lenses, because it's a fully manual lens. You've got a manual focus. But it's quite easy because nowadays the cameras that we have, they have peaking mode in as well. So let's go on to the next. Okay, so again, you're probably going to see the majority of my images, they are either a 35mm or an 85mm. My lenses that I use on the day will be a 35 and 85, and then when I do the group shots, I'm kind of using a 24mm. So if it was in micro four thirds format, it would be a 12mm, a 17mm, and a 45mm. So this one's quite nice soft colours. I don't really like heavy strong colours as well, so I like to keep all my colours nice and soft. And I expose for the shadows. I always expose for the shadows. And when you shoot in black and white, because on the back of my screen, my preview is always in black and white. So when I was looking to take this, I'm looking at it through a black and white screen. I think colour's very distracting when you're taking a picture. And if you shoot in black and white, it's like seeing a histogram. I'm just going to open this box because it keeps popping up, and then I can see what's happening. Cool. So when you shoot in colour, it's very distracting. Now, if you set your camera preview to black and white, you're not going to keep that black and white image because you're shooting in RAW. So when you import it into Lightroom, it'll automatically turn it back to colour. But you'll notice that you'll have minimal work to do on your images, and that's because when you're using a histogram to try and work out if your highlights and shadows are correct, if you put your camera preview into black and white, then you're basically seeing a live preview of your highlights and shadows. And if you get a good black and white, you will have a perfect colour picture. And I've taught this to many of people over the years, and the feedback that I get is always positive. It works every time, and you'll have very minimal editing to do on your highlights. So again, I'm just peeking behind a bush. I've placed a couple. I've already looked when I was doing this image. I already set it up so the reeds were coming on either side of them, and I've placed them in the middle of the reeds. Excuse me. I'm not really concerned about this part, so this part can be sort of blurred out, but then the top part's nice and sharp. My advice to you is don't focus and recompose because you're going to shift your plane of focus. So if I focused on them here and then I moved back down to the center, my focus plane would have been sharp around about where his hand is. So I actually moved the focus point over where I'm going to shoot on the camera. So I hope that makes sense. So let's go to the next one. And this is a good example of shooting something with the highlights and shadows. So you can see how much detail I've kept in the dress. We've got a window that's running along the left-hand side. It's a full-length window from floor to ceiling. It was still quite a an overcast day in the morning when I was doing the bride shots. The sun only come out in the afternoon, and this is a recent wedding. It was only done last month, so not a summer wedding at all. But you can see with the colours, the browns in the door, it's matching the chair, the carpet, and then the flow of the dress coming around. And I just wanted to capture her just sitting there and sort of thinking about what she's going to do when she's walking down the aisle, and gathering her thoughts as well for the day. So really like that image, probably one of my favourites. Have we got any questions coming in at all, Jay?
Yes, Rob. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you while you were talking about an image. So we've got a few that we'll get out of the way there. You were talking right back at the beginning, Rob, about obviously that you're quite strict with your images. So somebody asked how do you sort of pace yourself to 350 images?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I split the day up into, I call it a three-part day, and I'll use 3 memory cards for the day. So my first memory card I put in is it's the bride preps, and I'm looking for 50 shots from the bride preps. Then when I walk out finish the bride preps, I'll take the memory card out and I'll put in a fresh memory card, and then this is going to be for the ceremony and sort of the mingling shots. Ceremony and mingling shots, I'm looking to get sort of round about my 200 mark, including the bride preps, because I'm looking at the counter as well on the back of the screen. I'm looking about the 200 mark as I'm going along, but you do get a feel for it. So once I've done the bride preps, I know I've got 50 shots. When I've done the ceremony, I'm probably going to be up to 125, and I know when I'm at 125, I'm at my comfortable amount, and I know the day's going according to plan. Then we get the mingling shots. I take the mingling shots after the wedding, and I know I'm up to 200 shots. Then with the group shots, then this is the key. I don't let them dictate to me the group shots. I tell them that they can have 8 group shots. They just need to give me a list of the 8 group shots they want. So that's not including the big group shot. That's 8 individual group shots and then the big group shots. So 9 in total. I do my group shots, then I'm up to my next number, and then when it comes to they've had the speeches, I then swap the card out and I put a fresh card in for the evening shots, and then I'll carry on doing the evening shots. I'll get the first dance, the cutting of the cake, and then I get some evening dance shots, and that sort of brings me up to the 350 mark. When you do a lot of weddings, when you fix yourself to a certain amount, you'll get a feel for the certain part of the days, the number you should up to. So if I do kind of look at my screen and we're in a church and I think, you know, oh, I'm only at 100 shots and normally I'm at 125, I've got to start thinking, why is that? You know, what am I not taking that I would normally do? But I have a good talk with the couple before the wedding starts as well, explaining on the certain amount of things that I'll do, how long I'll take them away for to do their shots, how many shots I'm looking at getting for their portraits as well. But yeah, so I think a big key is separating the 300 shots into parts. So 3 parts. You already know you're going to get 10 shots, say in total for your group shots, 50 shots for your bride preps, 100 shots for your ceremony if it's in a church. That will change if it's not in a church, because a church wedding lasts roughly an hour. If it's a reception, then those are quite quick. They're done in sort of 20 to 30 minutes. Your evening shots, again, including the speeches and the dancing, the cutting the cake, you've got another 100 there, and then your mingling shots as well, so that'll take to 350. So hope that answers that question.
Yeah,
got another question?
yeah, a couple, yeah, mate, for you. how are you? What's your choice for metering? Are you metering in camera, or do you use a light meter, Rob?
Yeah, so another good question. Everyone uses evaluated metering. I kind of say to everyone it's the wrong way to meter, especially for a wedding photographer. So an evaluated metering, it changes from camera to camera, but the standard way is evaluated. That's when your camera looks at the whole scene, the whole picture, and it basically a camera can only see 18% grey, so it looks at the whites, it looks at the blacks, and then it tries and makes 18% grey. When you're a wedding photographer, that's probably the worst metering system to use, because we're looking at a bride in white and a groom in black or grey. So for skin tones, it's going to sort of blow one or the other out. So I use center weighted. And what center weighted is, it's spot metering, but it also takes into account a small area around that center as well. And you will get a much more precise meter reading as a wedding photographer using that. And probably all portrait photographers and wedding photographers will use center weighted metering. Next question.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. Just got somebody asked earlier on, actually, because you talked about flash. What flash do you use with the Olympus and why?
Okay, yeah. So my flash setup. Now, when I'm doing a wedding, I have an assistant with me. I do use a Profoto B2 power pack. It's a very small power pack, and it can go on your shoulder. And then I have a B2 head. The head goes on like a handheld stick, and it's got a small, probably about a 2 foot by 2 foot modifier on it, square modifier, and we have a grid with it as well. That's what I'll kind of use as the day-to-day goes, because my assistant sort of knows where I'm looking, so she'll just use it as a little bit of fill flash here and there. But come the evening, I don't use that at all. I'll use the Olympus FL600R flash. There's a setting that I have, and it's flawless. All my dance shots are done with a fisheye, so I use a fisheye. I set it in manual mode. I go ISO 800, 30th of a second at f4. I put the flash on the camera, directly facing in TTL mode, and give it a try. It is an absolute flawless setup, and you will get amazing results from it. And I've taught wedding photography classes, and I've took students along and have showed them an emotion. It's foolproof, and it works every time. So yeah, so the FL600R flash I'm using.
Brilliant, mate. And one final question for now, going back to the pacing and 3 cards. What's the main reason then for switching the cards out if you're keeping an eye on the numbers that you're taking anyway?
Okay, yeah, so another good question there. So basically it's a backup scenario. So we are doing someone's wedding. SD cards, they're brilliant. You know, nowadays I've never had one fail on me yet, but you know, going back a couple of years ago, SD cards wasn't as reliable as CF cards, and they quite easily got corrupted. So it's a habit that I've sort of pulled in, because say if I don't say if my bride prep SD card went corrupt, at least I've still got half of the wedding. So my clients aren't going to be pretty mad with me. So it's a backup scenario. So I'll put 3 SD cards for one wedding, so I know if anything happens to them, I've at least got the other half of the day when I get back home. And then when I get back home, I will back them up onto a Drobo 5D machine. And that's running I think a 32 terabyte, and then that also backs up onto a Drobo Mini, that's a 4 terabyte. and they stay on there then until I've finished editing them, and then I will compress them all and archive them off. So I'm going to move on to showing some more pictures now, and then we'll answer some more questions in a mo, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's brilliant, mate. You crack on.
Cool. So this is, again, I'm trying to keep it to one wedding. So this is the last one of this wedding that I'm going to show you. This was just a very quick shot of the groom and the groom's men. They was just getting ready in here, and as I was walking along to meet up with them at the ceremony room, they was just coming out. So again, just get a quick shot. Don't really like posing people. I'm not very big on posing. I just think it looks very fake, and we're there to capture a day of the memories, and I think if you do it in a much more sinister way where they all look naturally like they're standing, it's going to be a lot more pleasing, and you'll get a lot more bookings as well, because what I have found is that bride and grooms don't like to be posed. They much prefer for you to get more candid shots than you posing them. So that's that one. So the next one is, so this is done in the middle of the day. It was quite a bright day. Again, it's a recent wedding. It was one of those cold days with rich blue skies, and this was the Voigtlander 35mm, so the Voigtlander 17.5 f0.5, and I shot it at f2. You'll probably notice with all my images I shoot at between f2 and f4. I don't really go over that. When I do group shots, I'm at f8. So my portraits are always at f2 or f4. I love low apertures, and you'll see that on the next one. So what I've done here, this is using the Profoto B2, and we've actually got a grid on it as well. So I've took a meter reading of the blue sky up in the corner. That is where I've metered for. So you'll, if you can see my cursor, the left-hand side, you'll see a little bit of blue sky. So I metered for that because I wanted some of the blue sky coming in, and the detail of some of the clouds. You can just see in the corner there, and just see through the trees just right in front of you. And that metering for this, because this was the brightest part of the scene. If I metered for this, then the couple fell into shadow. They were in darkness. So what I did, I'm lying down on the floor, and I always think it's good, don't shoot at eye level when you're doing portraits like this, because we see the world at eye level all the time, so it's not interesting. But if we see from a different perspective, that's what gives us a different image from everyone else. So I'm lying down on the floor, and yes, I did forget that my camera has a screen that tilts out on the back. So instead I just laid down and got dirty in all the grass. So it was only after I realised my screen did tilt. And then what I've done then, again, I don't meter my flash. I don't believe in metering flash. I have this theory that all my flashes, all my speed lights, they're on 8th power. So if they've got a power reading on the back, I set them to 8th power. I'll then take a picture and have a look at the screen and see what it looks like. If I think it needs to be brighter, I'll move the flash closer to my subject. So it never moves off 8th power. If I start having to put a single speed light on full power, then I'm going to drain my batteries faster. I'm going to wait for it to recycle, and I haven't got that time. So this is the same principle with the Profoto, the B2. Even though it's got a power pack, I need that power pack to last me all day. I can charge it up, but on some occasions I may be working in fields and I haven't got that opportunity to charge it up. So I normally set the power pack around about number 4, because on the B2s it goes from 1 to 10. So I'll set it on number 4. It's got the grid on it, and then I'm basically say to my assistant, I'll take the first shot, look at them, and think, no, it's a bit too dull, and I'll say to my assistant, move forward a foot, and she'll just move 1 foot forward. I retake it and look at it, and I think, okay, yeah, that's perfect. So that's how I meter for flash. I'll meter the sky for my ambient light, so that's all my camera set up. I don't need to move anything. It's going to be ISO 200 because I'm using flash, so we can keep it nice and clean. My aperture, I'm going to shoot it, if I want a really shallow depth of field, I'll go for f2, but if I want to close it down a little bit, then I'll shoot at f4, so I know my apertures. And then I'm just going to have my flash on number 2 or 8th power on the speed light, take the shot, and then depending on if it's too dark or too bright, I will get my assistant to move forward or backwards. So I hope that's explained that image, and we've kept loads of detail. We can see we've got all the detail here. It's nice lit, and we can even see the dress. We've got loads of detail in the dress. Nothing is blown out because we can see all the netting around the dress as well. So cool. So we'll move on to the next. So this one is definitely the Voigtlander, and it's the 17.5, and it's shot at f2. And again, it does go to 0.95, but 0.95 is insanely Voigtlerish, I'll say. When you're shooting at 0.95, your depth of field is so thin that wherever you focus, you cannot move your camera, or else, I mean, basically at 0.95 you would have his eyes in focus, and then from his cheekbone down would be out of focus, and from the top of his forehead line up would be out of focus. And I'll show you another image later on that's along that lines. So, but you can see there that his hand is actually out of focus with the wedding ring on, but his face is perfectly sharp. That's the Voigtlander. Again, manual focus lens and lovely details in it. And that was just a quick portrait while we was waiting around for the drinks coming out. So very quick and clean. If you are going to do pictures like this, just grab one of the chairs, and if you sit them on. If you sit them on the chair the right way around, they don't know what to do with the hands, and they're all nervous. But if you tell them to stride over a chair and lean onto it, they've already got this really nice posture, you know, the shoulders and the way they're looking at you. So really, really nice way to do. Again, this is a confetti shot. I'm sitting down here, and I'm actually using for this the 7 to 14 millimeter new Olympus lens that came out, and it will be at 7 millimeters. And the great thing with micro four thirds, there's very little aberration on any lenses. So you can see up in the corners here, we've got no sort of stretching over here, and we've got no stretching here, and that's at 7 millimeters. So I'm quite close to them. And again, the ProPhoto light is over the top of me, and it's pointing down at them, and it freezes all the droplets here, and then I get a nice clean expressions on their face. Just a getting ready shot. Again, this is the Voigtlander. Again, 35 millimeters. It's just my favourite one to use. And I've exposed from outside here because I just want the outline of her as she's getting ready. So I'm going to fire through some because I want to get through some portraits as well for you, for everyone. Just a simple one. I just hung the veil on the side, and so she's all blurred out, and you know it's the bride there from the veil, but there's nothing else to say that it's the bride bar the veil there, but your mind just says that it's the bride getting ready. So I quite like doing things like that. I love using mirrors and hanging the dress up and using the netting, shooting through the netting. This one was a men's toilets, believe it or not. So yeah, the window in the men's toilets was beautiful light coming through. So we went into the men's toilets, and I loved all the green tiles on there and the look that it gave. Love telling that story. So this is in Manchester. It's actually in a shopping precinct, and basically I've underexposed the ambient light by 2 stops. The flash is, it's a Elastilite softbox on this actually, on the left hand side, so a 24 by 24 Elastilite softbox, and we did it at another location, and when the flash fired, the bride was beautiful lit, the groom was beautiful lit on one side, but then the right hand side, it was in darkness. So there was this pillar, which is an aluminium pillar. It's got aluminium all wrapped around it, and instead I moved them to there, got them to lean against the pillar. So what's actually happened now is I'm using one light source, which is lit this side, but then the aluminium pillar here, you can see the light hitting, has bounced back and is lighting the other side of them. So a one light setup is doing a 2 light trick. Worked very well. This one is flash, believe it or not. So I do like using flash at weddings. I use it quite a lot, and the flash is up this side. But it was a nice day. We're underneath this big tree, and there was plenty enough normal light to do it without the flash. But I like using the flash to really boost the colours, the detail on the dress. It's a lovely white dress. It brings all the details out, all the lovely flowers, and it's really nicely lit as well. So, and then this one as well. So again, the flash, you should be looking at pictures, and you shouldn't be able to say that there was flash there or not. That's when you know that you're getting the flash right. This has got flash in it. You can tell really, because if you look at the faces, they're lit on this side and they're lit on this side, but if you look at the bush at the back, they've got massive bushes coming over the top of them. And then you can see here on the seat, if you come to the end of the seat, you can see here that it's darker there, and then when you come nearer to them, that it's a lot lighter there. So I can tell that there's flash there by just those scenarios, but anyone else looking at it would just think it was natural light. Again, the bride just getting ready. This is just natural light through the window. I'm going to take some questions just in a mo. The background, it was quite messy everywhere, so I've just found all these overgrowing flowers in the background, and I've just sat him on a chair and shot down on him. So because I'm standing up shooting down, he already lifts his chin up, and we get a really nice image there. The church, some vicars, reverends, very strict. This one was. It was a scenario, you stand at the back, you don't move, and that's it. I don't want to hear your camera. Luckily, we've got silent mode, so I switched it onto there. But yeah, she wouldn't let me move from the back of the church. And just so you know, my exposure for this is that stained glass window just there. So right in front, just above the heads, that's where my exposure is. The church was very dark. This is actually probably around about ISO 1600 I was shooting this. And again there, you can just see on this bulb on the right hand side, you can see that I am slightly overexposing it just to get the nice light on them here. And I am at you know, a higher ISO to do that. Because obviously in churches, most of it is no flashes are allowed. This one's just natural light. I haven't set anything up, that's just the way it was. I don't really like setting fake things up. I don't like shooting dresses on chandeliers, because when do you ever walk into a room and the dress is hanging on a chandelier? It never is. So I always, if I have to set anything up, I'll always put it somewhere where it looks a lot more natural looking. Just another groom shot. That was actually the first lesbian wedding that I did when it became legal. So was that one? Again, this is the Voigtlander. I can always tell the Voigtlander. Lovely colours it gives, and I think the lens is a big part of how you get them colours. It just, the way it renders an image is beautiful. You can tell in the background here how much it's out of focus. Look at all the detail. There's nothing blown out. Love that lens. Again, this is I've probably used my Voigtländer lenses for 80% of my wedding photography. This is the 35mm as well, but you can just see that how much detail it keeps. Look at the white canopy. Look at the sky out there. If you look at the bush there, you can still see all the detail in the bush. So there's nothing overexposed in that image. We've kept all the detail. Nice image just into the bush. And let me just zoom along here. I'm going to fly to these next. This is natural light, but I have put a heavy vignette around it. This was just an old door to a garage that we used. And I'm going to fly through some of these now. Double exposure, we can do this in camera now. Most digital cameras can do this. So you take the first shot and then it puts an overlay on, and you can do the second shot. So that's a good way to separate yourself from everyone else. Just so you know, a bank actually bought this image off me. I made a lot of money off this image. And it was two banks that were merging into one. It went in 6 different countries around the world. So very pleased with that. This one, very busy main road, loads of traffic going by. The bridge runs along the bottom of where the frame is, but the way I've chopped it off, it just looks like they're out in the field enjoying themselves. Nice shallow depth of field here coming along. So I'm going to show you a couple more from the weddings, and then we're going to go on to something else. This is an interesting one, because this one is actually, I exposed the chandelier here. The couple were in darkness, so up on the top there's a ledge, and I actually had a hot lamp shining down onto them. The reason I didn't use flash is because the colour temperature of the flash was obviously too white, and I didn't have any gels on me, but I had a hot lamp, and because the hot lamp's yellow, I put that on the top, so the colour temperatures matched. So I didn't really have to do anything in post to keep the colour temperatures different. Nice window light. Again, this is the Voigtlander, and this is the 42.5 one. But the next one is the 17.5. So, and you can see how much detail and the colours it keeps. It's beautiful lens. Little detail shots. Let's move to this one. So the signing of the register, I tend to put a long lens on and capture them as it's being done. When the registrar will turn around to me and go, okay, you can do the sign in the register. So 90% of the time I'll turn around and go, that's okay, I've already done the shots. It's probably better, instead of setting them up, take the pictures of them signing. So a lot of registrars will say, you're not allowed to take pictures of the registrar signing. Well, we all have long lenses, so we can just snap away. And I have known a lot of them now, they do say, so if you're doing it from a distance, that's fine, you're just not allowed to do it close up so you can see all the details. Again, I don't understand that, because when you're in a church, the reverend or vicar, they're normally happy for you to snap away, so it's one rule for one and one for another. This is a nice shot getting ready. He didn't even know I was doing this, so as he was fastening his buttons up, I took myself into the corner, and I've rested the camera, and this is the Voigtländer 17.5. I rested it on top of the side where the telly was and all his wallet and everything, and I got a lovely reflection of him off the glass top. And again, because I'm using center weighted metering system, my camera is metering directly on him, and I'm getting a perfect exposure because of that. If I was to use evaluated metering system, what metered the whole scene, then he would have actually been in darkness, because the meter would have seen the window light here coming through, and it would have metered for the brightest part of the scene, which would have been here, so we would have had to overexpose the scene. But because I'm in center weighted and I've got it exactly on the subject, it's absolutely perfect, and I don't need to do nothing with it. Again, nice winter's day, all the detail in the dress and the bride and groom. And for this one, I would say if you're going to do anything that's in a room, the first thing you do is go around and switch every single light on in the room. So believe it or not, when I did this, there was a couple sitting on the back left-hand side having tea, and a couple sitting over here having some teas and that. And we just asked them if they would just come over my side while I did this shot, because this shot was important to them. They wanted one in the room. So I made it symmetrical. I actually turned on all the lights. There was enough light in there, but if you took the picture with just the light that was in the room and not the back wall lights and the chandelier, it just looked a bit dull and lifeless. But when we switched all the lights on, we got all this lovely yellow sort of shining out of the lights, and the golds and the gold trimmings, and I just thought it really made it work a lot nicer. So any questions on any of that, Jay, before I go over to some more pictures?
Just a couple, Rob, because obviously I do want you to share your portraits with them.
Okay.
So, can you hear me, mate?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you now.
All
yeah.
right, brilliant. You answered a lot as you went, because I've sort of been catching about a lot of the questions coming through about how you're metering. You've mentioned that. What are your favourite lenses? Well, we've talked about your lenses. You mentioned obviously when you were using flash that you prefer to use an ISO of 200. I know you were outside. When you're choosing your ISO, Rob, especially on the weddings and so on, are you using auto ISO, or are you judging what you want the ISO to be?
Yeah, so another good question that is. So I never use auto ISO. I fully work in manual. And the rule of the thumb is, if it's a bright day, I'm on ISO 200, because that's my base ISO on an Olympus is 200. If it's an overcast day, I'm on ISO 400. And come the evening, I'm on ISO 800. So you sort of get this feel for a three-part stage. And it revolves around not only my workflow but my camera settings. So I know if I start off in the morning, it's lovely rich blue skies or a really sunny day, I'm just going to be at ISO 200. If it's comes an overcast day, or roughly around about 3 o'clock when the sun starts going down, I'm at ISO 400. And then come the evening, my camera's in ISO 800. I very rarely go above 1600. I have it set to 1600 when I'm in churches, but more often not, I'm roughly around about 800 in a church. The plus with me, and probably I'm spoiled, is the camera's got 5-axis image stabilization, so it keeps it really still. I mean, I know I can shoot at 1/5 of a second handheld and it'll give me a really sharp shot. So that helps a lot on picking what ISO that you are shooting in. But yeah, so I try and keep it as clean as I can, but majority of the day, if it's overcast, I'll probably be around about 400. Pretty much all my street work, because I shoot it in black and white and I like a little bit of a grainy look, I'm always at ISO 400. And because we're going to capture people walking and we need a faster shutter speed, I'll tend to always put it at ISO 400. So, anything else?
No, bro, mate, I think we should. I know we want to share some of the street and your portrait work, so let's crack on, Rob. Cheers, mate.
Cool. No worries. Let's. So I'm going to. We're at 10 to now, so I'll try and get through this because I really want to show you some of the street stuff I do as well. So this is a studio light. It's a one light setup. In the studio, I will always be at ISO 200. Always at ISO 200 at 2/50th of a second because we go to our sync speed on our cameras and we know it's 2/50th. Now do check your manuals because on Fuji's it's 1/80th, on Leica it's 1/80th, Olympus is 2/50th up to 3/20th, and Nikon and Canon vary depending on their make and model of camera. So do check on that, but it's always worth knowing what your sync speed is. So I sort of wanted a bit of a hard edge, sort of rough look. We've got a makeup artist in that sprayed all the face with silver and black, and actually I tell a lie, it started off with a one light scenario. We've got a 1.5 meter octabox to the left hand side, and then I added in two strip lights with grids on. So on the shoulders you see the light in there. That was, excuse me, just to give some separation. But the lights for the shoulders for the separation were on the lowest power. Okay. This was using an eye lighter from Westcott you can see if you look at the eyes, see how you got this curve under the eyes. That's how you can always tell that there's been a reflector underneath there to lift all the shadows up at the chin. And then above we had an octa lighting from above down as well, and you can tell it's from above lighting down because we've got stronger on the hair. You can see it's drifting off to the bottom, the light, but then the chest is all well lit as well, and then the reflectors bouncing it back under the chin to fill the shadows in and the sockets of the eyes as well. So very easy setup, one light and a reflector. Let's move on. This was just done on the streets, down a back alley, and it's a one light. This is it's a speed light I use for this, and it's just on a stand just outside a shot, and it's it'll be zoomed out to 105, and it will be on 8th power because you can tell by the halo going around there. So if it had a modifier on, this would be a lot softer and it'd be probably lit all around here. You can tell it's zoomed out just by the way it's lit. You can tell more on that one there. I threw this in so you could see. Very well lit around there. But the good way about using the zoom function on a bare bulb speed light is it will give you an actual vignette. So if you underexpose, if you take a picture of the scene correctly and then underexpose it 2 stops, then add your speed light in, you get a nice vignette. This one was done with one ice light. So I just got to lift a hood up over, and you tell by your eye there, you can see the ice light. That's just one ice light there. Now we've got a natural light one. This was done at Shoreditch in London, and I've just got her stood in a doorway, but she, instead of stood right at the front of the doorway, she stood, it's about a meter back into the doorway. So that way I'm metering for her face here with the natural light that's coming through the doorway, and then it renders the whole of the scene in darkness, but then she's just lovely lit just on where the natural light's hitting her. So a lovely and easy way to do a portrait. And again, this is natural light using the Voigtlander, and I'm doing it from a low angle and I'm lifting it upwards, so we've got all the converging lines of the corrugated iron coming up. So a very easy way to do, and all I've done is got it to look over the top of me. Definitely the Voigtlander, so you can tell here with all this coming around. And again, this is natural light, and all of these that you'll see next, they're all natural light, and they are just using a reflector. I'm putting a reflector in front of them. You can see how the light's strong behind, and it's giving her a hair light, and I'm just bouncing some back into her face. And it's the same with this one. It's amazing what you can do with a reflector. And this one, now, this is actually a Leica image. This was shot using a Leica and the Summicron 50mm at f2. So that's the difference with that one. This actually does have a speed light in. There's one speed light on 8th power at the back there that's giving separation on him here, and then down on the floor there is a reflector that's on the floor bouncing just the natural light back into his face, and this was done just underneath an underpass of a bridge. So those are the portraits. I'll ask Jay if there's any questions while I'm just going to load up some street photography images. Have we got any questions there, Jay?
Yeah, a couple come through, Bud, and I know we want to share some of your street stuff with them as well. But I'll ask these quickly. How do you? Obviously, I'll reread. Sorry, I'll start again. Are you happy with the Olympus can do everything that a DSLR can?
Definitely. Now, if you would have asked me, 6 years ago, would I ever change make a camera, I would have been straight, no, not at all. I was Nikon. I had a D4, I had a D800, and I had a D700, and I would just, without any shadow of doubt, I'd never change at all. The first time I got the Olympus, it was actually the EM5 when it first came out, and I was going to Cuba, and I just thought, you know what, I don't want to take all my equipment with me. I don't want to lug it all around. You know, Cuba could get nicked. So I just thought, you know what, I'll just buy one of these Olympus cameras. It looks quite retro. I like it. Took it to Cuba, come back, and I was blown away with the images. I couldn't work out what was going on. I was loading it up to against my D4, comparing images, and I couldn't tell the difference. I was zooming into them and couldn't tell the difference. And I thought, well, why am I carrying all this gear around when this little camera is doing the same as all this gear? So I took it to a wedding. I took all my normal equipment. I shot 70% of the wedding on the EM5. The only reason I didn't shoot all of it is because I was working on a kit lens on the camera and I didn't have all the lenses that I really wanted. So I tweeted an image off from using the camera, and then Olympus contacted me and asked me if I wanted to work with them and become an ambassador. That's when I was then supplied with the equipment, and when I was shooting the camera with the right lenses, I realized that I really didn't need any of the DSLR stuff anymore, and I sold off all of my Nikon gear, and I honestly don't own any DSLRs anymore, and I wouldn't go back there, because one thing as a wedding photographer, when I was using big massive DSLR cameras, I was coming home with my shoulders aching, very tired, and moving over to the mirrorless systems, I'm still full of life when I come home. I don't feel tired anymore, and I do think it has improved my photography, because when I was covering weddings with a big DSLR camera with a huge lens, you lift it up, people see you, and they shy away from you, because there's a lot of people that don't want the pictures taken, and they'll be like, oh, it's the wedding photographer, no, not my picture. When I moved to the mirrorless system, because it's so compact and small, people don't even recognize you as a wedding photographer. They don't think, oh God, he's coming out with a camera. They don't even see you. So you end up getting a lot more candid shots and better expressions of people. And I really think it does, down the line, it'll improve your photography and improve the way that you do get pictures, especially with weddings and street photography. It's so much better. Have we got any more there, Jay?
Yeah, just a couple, mate. But I do want you. Well, please stay with us, guys. I know Rob, you're happy to stay with us because I do want you to see your street photography as well. But just I've got to share this with you, Rob. Great answer. My Nikon has to go. I've got a feeling that there'll be some DSLR kit on eBay tonight, mate. Just put that out there. So a couple of quick techie questions, and I'll hang on to the other sort of generic ones, and we'll do those at the end for people who stay with us. Are you Sorry, are you using auto white balance, Rob?
Yeah, auto white balance in the Olympus, I think it's pretty spot on. And this goes for when you're in areas what's quite difficult to say you've got tungsten and ambient come in. I really do think it gives a good balance between the two. Yeah, always auto white balance. Is there a scenario where I would? The only scenario where I would pick my own white balance is if I use flash. Say I'm doing a portrait with the bride and groom. Now flash tends to be daylight balance, so 50-600K. So to save it getting filled with that, when I'm doing a portrait, I'll go into the Kelvin and I'll just set my Kelvin to 50-600K, so I know then that it's less production time when it comes to editing, because I know I'm using flash to light the portrait. So when I did the bride and groom sitting on the log, it's daylight anyway, but I'm going to use flash, so I actually popped it into 5600 Kelvin, and so once the flash went off, my preview that I see on the back of the screen, that's the image that I want to see correct. I don't want to look at it and think, oh, it's a little bit yellow, I'll need to correct that. I don't want to work on my images too much. I want to limit the time. So 95% of the time auto white balance, except for when I know I'm using flash for a portrait, and I'll stick it into 5600K. So we've got another one there, Jay?
Perfect, mate. Just a reminder, actually. I know you've mentioned it earlier on in the webinar. Can you just remind them, because I think you said you use 2 Olympus cameras. Can you just remind them which models you use?
Yeah, so I use the EM5, so the OMD EM5 Mark II, so that's the Mark II generation, and then I use the OMD EM1 as well. So if you was looking on them, say on the Olympus website, then the OMD EM1 is what they call the professional camera, and I love the camera, I love it to bits. But I actually use my EM5 Mark II more than I do the EM1. So my EM1 stays in my bag, and that has the lens on it that I'm going to do the group shots with. And I basically only use that camera when I'm doing my group shots. And then my EM5 Mark II is the camera that's always on me, and I'm more comfortable changing my lenses. I have a little think tank pouch on the side of my hip, and the pouch holds 3 lenses in, so I have my lenses in there with my spare batteries and SD cards. Then my assistant will have my main bag with the backup camera, speed lights and whatever else in, and I work with the EM5 Mark II all the time. The reason behind that is, and everyone always asks the question, so the EM5 Mark II is a newer camera. It's got the newer processor in, the newer image stabilization, and it's a stop better in low light. If you're a sports photographer, then the EM1 is a must for you, because the EM1 has a bigger buffer in it. If you're using sort of like the rapid fire and you're going to do 20 shots in a row, it writes to the memory a lot faster, but I don't use that function. So for me, the EM5 is a winner. It's a lighter camera, and it just fits into how I work as well. Another question?
No, perfect, mate. I think let's have a look at your great street photography, and I've just got a couple of generic questions that we'll finish off with. So, guys, stay with us. I know Rob's happy to stay with us, but just
Yes.
a bit long. All yours, mate.
Cool, brilliant. So a couple of street photos here. Street, I love street. I've got about 20 images, so I'll fly through them because I know we're running over, but I'm happy to do this. I love talking about this. Try and frame your subjects somewhere different. So this lady's sitting down, and I've shot through some scaffolding and framed her within sort of the square and triangles of the scaffolding. Really like that, nice black and white. This one, do you know what? It's actually slightly out of focus, but I don't mind that because you've got, and it's one of those moments you capture and you don't know how you've captured it, but you've got all forms of transport for London. You know, you've got the guy on the bike, the push bike, the guy on the motorbike, and then the taxi. And if you look how they're placed, they're all placed where it's as though they're set off in purpose with just that slight speed in front, but believe it or not, they've just come around the roundabout and trying to get through the traffic light before it turned red. So it's all about the moments for street photography and just capturing it, and that comes across from wedding photography. It's all about the moment, and you're always scanning everyone to see expressions on faces and how you can snap it and capture that. Don't always look at the bride and groom and concentrate on the bride and groom, because I certainly don't do that. I mean, a lot of my photos are the behind the scene photos of the guests, you know, teary-eyed and smiles and singing with the hymns and talking to each other with the drinks, and that's what the couple wants to see, because they're not seeing all that on the day because they're so overwhelmed. So make sure you capture all of that. You know, I'm quite happy, and again, this was slightly out of focus, but I like that sort of look of street images like that. I'm quite happy to stand in the middle of the street and just point my camera and shoot, and this is what I did. This guy was sort of grinning at me as we were walking by, but I really like the Doctor Who look he was giving. And again, this was just a mini speeding along, but I do put a lot of my shots out of focus when I'm on the street. I just like that sort of look, that mysterious look, and getting you thinking. I'm not very one for really sharp images. Not every image has to be sharp, and I see so many people deleting images because it's not sharp, or they're zooming into it to look at the pixels and going, you know, it's not sharp. I mean, images aren't about every single image being sharp. It's about you're an artist in your own way, and you know, you can look at some artist canvases and think, well, what is that? You know, it looks a mess, but another artist can look at it and go, oh wow, it's amazing. You know, I love what you've done to it. St. Paul's, just in a different way. Instead of getting all of St. Paul's, just the lights that was coming through there and lighting it all. I just like this scenario here. The no entry, the woman with the red shoes standing under the red no entry, the woman taking a picture of the woman with the bag, and it's as though the sign's saying, you know, no pictures. And I just sort of like that feel behind it. Again, just a beer can thrown on the floor, but I liked how the curb was bending around, and this was shot at f2, so a lot of street photographers will always shoot at f8. I zone focus when I'm doing street photography. So what that is, on the front of your lens you have a scale, and the scale will tell you at what distance you're focused. So I set my distance to 3 meters, and I'll work between f2 and f4. So I know if my subject is 3 meters away from me, they're going to be in focus. So this means that if I'm shooting in manual, all my cameras set up, I can actually take a picture very fast on the street without them even noticing, because all I'm judging is distance. I just need them to be 3 meters away from me. So again, I like the colours, the blues reflected off the buildings, the blue sky, and then we've got the bush in the corner with the reds and greens. This was like a sculpture in the middle, but I quite like how you can sort of see the picture, the person's face through the holes on the reflections. Again, my exposure for this was the highlights. Because I exposed for the highlights, I kept all the detail underneath the bridge of the buildings there, and you can see in the shadows of the bridge, the girders, you can see all the girders, and I thought it was quite a good photo with all the shoes hanging over there. Everyone sort of knows this this place. Now I will tell you, I am on centre weighted metering. That's all I ever use, and for that reason and that reason only, this picture was straight out of camera. So on this one you can see I've got no logo in the corner because this is actually straight out of camera. My metering, where the E is, you've got a door, and my meter was where the E is, and I've metered for that. Because I've metered for that area, I've kept all the details in the sky, nothing's blown out, and even in the shadows down here on the left hand side we've got some lovely shadows. So a great example of how you can take a shot straight out of camera and it not need anything done to it. I like being artistic with my street photography, so these are legs holding up a building, and I just like the texture it's giving with the different lights that were falling off. And again, we've got this building here. I've cut it off at the top, but I've kept the people. There's two people you see right at the top of the girder looking down on me, and then I like the reflection now. The bottom part is showing the top part. And again, lovely example of keeping your highlights and shadows. So we've got some beautiful buildings on the left and right side. The way that it's reflecting, all the windows you see are reflecting the lighting, so that's lighting up all your shadows. We've got some lovely details in the sky as well. Always got to have a fellow bird in the shot, and it's London, so we've got to have a pigeon shot, because in London now pigeons are quite rare because they killed a lot of them off because they're vermin. So if you go to Trafalgar Square, there is no longer any pigeons there because they have hawks that patrol Trafalgar Square to scare all the pigeons off. Believe it or not, I was talking to the hawk manager when I was up there last, so quite a rare sight to see a pigeon, so I shot that. I like using reflections. Again, if I like a certain area, I'm quite happy just to sort of stand around and wait for a subject to come in. Now I like the browns, the fancy shoes that are in the window, and then the guy that walks into the shot is wearing his brown coat, you know, shoes, he's looking across the window, and then the reflection of him is looking back at himself, and it's as though those shoes are longing to be, you know, his. So I quite like that little story. Oh, this is New York, so skyscraper heaven. Over there when the sun's out, it's so easy to photograph buildings. They all light up. And again, just walking by, two police. She's probably asking for directions, but she looks like she's done something wrong. So quite like that. Just a simple sign, but everyone looks at it. They all sort of know, oh yeah, New York. It says Fifth Avenue, and it's got the Statue of Liberty in there. And you can tell how the dynamic range of the Olympus camera, and I know we keep talking about the Olympus camera, but it's such a phenomenal camera. Look at all the shadows down the bottom here, the way it's captured the light, and these are neon boards, and neon boards are quite hard to photograph because normally if you photograph them, you'll get like sort of a rolling effect across the boards. But there's none of that there, and we've got all the detail in the shadows all around, so that's what I'm always looking for. I want details in the shadows. I don't want to lose that. So we've got Brooklyn Bridge, and a good old taxi as well. Everyone's going to take a good old New York taxi picture. And that sort of really brings me to the end of my photos. So I know it was wedding and portraits, but I thought, you know, it'd be really good to show you some of the street photography as well, just to finish off. And I'm going to pass you back over to Jay now, and I hope you've enjoyed looking at my images because I've enjoyed talking about them. Jay, so over to you.
Cheers, mate, and thanks for sticking with us, and a lot of you stayed with us as well, which I'm sure you agree was worth it because I'm a big street photography fan, so I think it complemented everything we talked about today, Rob. Rob, thank you for joining us tonight. I know you're a very busy man, so we appreciate that you've given us your time. A couple of quick questions, mate, but you have answered quite a lot as we go, but people have stayed with us, only fair that I ask them. I've got a two-prong lens question. So I'm going to hit you with the first part. If I think the first part was more related towards your weddings rather than talking about your street. So if you had to buy two lenses for your Olympus for your wedding photography, what would the two lenses be?
So without a shadow of a doubt, the 17mm and the 45mm. So the 17mm is equivalent of a 35mm on a full frame camera, and the 45mm is equivalent of your 85mm on a camera. And every wedding photographer should have them two lenses. Now you've probably gathered I work on primes. That I've got nothing against zooms, but as a wedding photographer, prime lenses are far better because they've got lower apertures. So you can buy the pro lenses, say like the 12 to 40 on the Olympus or the 40 to 150. They're 2.8 fixed all the way through. But if you go to the primes, you buy the 17mm prime and the 45mm prime, and they're 1.8 f1.8. So the reason behind that, if you're in a church, you can go to a lower aperture and you don't need to use as high as ISO. So very bright lenses, beautiful to work with, and it keeps your gear mega light. And that's the most important thing. We want to keep the gear light. So, okay.
Perfect. Well, the second prong was related to your street photography. If you were to have one lens for your street photography, what lens would it be?
Okay, and I'm going to say this again. The 17mm. So there's two lenses I use for street photography, and that is the 17 and 50. I don't like using long lenses, sort of like the 45, the 75 for street photography. I don't mind being interactive with everyone. The 17mm is obviously your 35mm. That's how we look at the world. We look in a 35mm format. So with two eyes open, that's 35mm. So definitely for an Olympus, you want to get the 17mm for street photography. If you want a bit of a narrower view, then a 50mm. And a 50mm is, if you shut one eye, then you're looking at the world in a 50mm lens with one eye. But I would always have my 17mm on my Olympus when doing street photography.
Brilliant, mate. I don't know, well, I'm going to ask you this question, and you can tell me yes or no if you've got any experience. Somebody asked quite early on when we were talking about your weddings, have you had any experience photographing Asian weddings? And if you have, do you have any advice for people who are considering getting into the Asian weddings?
Okay, yeah. So I've done quite a few Asian weddings. Be prepared. Asian weddings are not like a normal British wedding. Asian weddings go on for a long time. I mean, they'll either hire you to cover the sort of the celebratory part, or they might hire you to do all 3 days. An Asian wedding will go on for 3 days. If you just do the celebratory part, the actual marriage ceremony, you'll be starting at 4 in the morning because that's when the groom gets ready. They're very different because you don't take pictures of the bride and groom. If it's the groom's side that takes you on, you'll only be taking pictures of the groom, and the bride's side, they'll arrange and sort their own photographer out. The groom or the bride will be ready at 5 in the morning, so you'll be starting at 4 in the morning. They'll be sitting at home, probably in a marquee or something like that, because all the family will come and visit them, and then hand them money and presents there. And then after that's happened, and that takes a long time, you will then go down to the temple, and then their ceremony will, it's quite strange. They'll eat first. They always eat first, and then their ceremony will last 2 to 3 hours, just to get married. And then after they've done that, they'll have the British sort of signing of the register as well. And then it goes straight into the evening, and then a couple of different things that happens. They don't really have a first dance. They sort of have the feeding of the cake, and basically instead of the cutting of the cake, the mums and dads from both sides will feed the bride and groom the cake, and those are sort of like the really important shots you need to get. I'll pre-warn you, their do's are very loud. I mean, when I come away from them, there was one that I covered, and I honestly thought that I had tinnitus in my ears for days after, because the ringing from the music was still in my ears for 3 days after. So they're very loud, and they tend to go all out. Yeah, very hard work, but very enjoyable. And the Indian scenario scene will always treat you very well, and welcome you into their home. So that's if you do get into that side, they are very good to work with.
Brilliant, mate. Rob, just sort of a generic question really, because obviously we invited you tonight also in conjunction with, we have a relationship, and I know you do, with Flaghead Photographic, and you've talked a lot about the Voigtländer lens. This is the lens obviously that you favour. These are the prime lenses you've been talking about tonight.
Their build quality is astronomical. So I did a little YouTube video on these some time ago, and I compared them to the equivalent. So I got the 17mm Olympus lens, and I weighed that, and then I got the 17mm Voigtlander lens, and I weighed that, and you've seen that the Voigtlander lens actually weighed more than the camera. But that's because of quality. Because the thing, when it comes to manual lenses, and Voigtlander lenses, they are manual lenses, all their money goes into the glass. So these lenses, they weigh a ton, but that's because there's decent glass in that, and that's what you should be investing in your lenses. So 100% Voigtlander lenses, they are well worth their money, and they are built to last as well.
Brilliant. Rob, thank you so much for your time tonight. I know that well, you're very lucky. You're off to New York on Friday. We'll say no more. I'm very jealous. I know it's a bit. I know it's work, but so it's a tough job, Rob. It's a tough.
I know. I've got to go and do some more pictures over in New York, so have to do it. But it's an amazing place, and very friendly people out there. So yeah, it's looking forward to it.
I'm very, very jealous. Rob, a couple of quick things to share with you. Some feedback that we've had loads of positive feedback. Thank you for your time. So I just want to share these with you. A great insight into keeping things simple and nailing the results. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rob, for an interesting webinar. As a new Olympus user, it was especially informative. Have a great time in New York, pal. And so just a few of the many messages that I had for you, pal.
That's brilliant. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Rob, have a great time in New York. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Have a good night, and we'll see you all again real soon. Bye, everybody.